When a Cherokee warrior came to her rescue, cruel settlers were hanging a girl, and everything changed. The town sat near the edge of the frontier, surrounded by thick trees and dusty land that stretched far beyond the eye could see. It looked quiet from a distance, almost peaceful. Small wooden houses stood in uneven rows, their roofs worn by sun and rain. Smoke slowly rose from chimneys each morning, and the sound of boots on dirt roads echoed through the streets. But beneath this calm surface, fear lived in every corner. The settlers who controlled the town believed they owned everything around them: the land, the rules, and even the people. A few powerful men made decisions for everyone else. They spoke loudly, acted boldly, and never questioned themselves. Anyone who disagreed stayed silent, because speaking up meant trouble. Over time, fear became normal. People learned to look away instead of getting involved. On the far side of the town lived a young girl named Eliza. She was not loud or important in the eyes of others. She did simple work, helped where she could, and tried to stay invisible. Her life was hard, but she never complained. She believed kindness mattered, even in a place where kindness was rare. Some people noticed her gentle nature, but most barely saw her at all. Eliza had lost her parents years ago. Since then, she survived by working for others, cleaning homes, carrying water, and doing small tasks in exchange for food. She dreamed of leaving the town one day, finding a place where people judged less and listened more. But dreams felt far away in a town ruled by fear. One afternoon, something changed. A valuable item went missing from one of the powerful settlers' homes. No one knew where it went, but anger spread quickly. The men demanded answers. They wanted someone to blame, someone weak enough to punish. Whispers passed from one person to another. Soon, Eliza's name was spoken, not because of proof, but because she was an easy target. She was taken from her small room before she could understand what was happening. No one explained. No one listened. She tried to speak, but her words were drowned out by shouting voices. The settlers claimed she was guilty, even though no one had seen her take anything. Truth did not matter. Control did. News spread quickly through the town. People gathered, drawn by fear and curiosity. Some felt uncomfortable, but they still came. Others came because they believed power should never be questioned. Eliza stood among them, her hands trembling, her heart racing. She searched faces for kindness, for someone willing to help, but most eyes turned away. The place where the settlers gathered people was open and cold. The air felt heavy, as if it carried the weight of many wrong decisions made before. Eliza stood still, trying to stay strong. Inside, fear pressed against her chest, but she refused to cry. She had learned long ago that tears did not soften hard hearts. As the sun moved lower in the sky, shadows grew longer. The settlers spoke of rules and order, but their voices were filled with anger, not justice. They said examples had to be made. They said the town needed to be reminded of consequences. Not once did they ask Eliza for the truth. People in the crowd felt uneasy. Some had known Eliza for years. They remembered her kindness, her quiet nature. A few wanted to speak, but fear held their tongues. They had families, homes, lives they could lose. Silence felt safer than courage. Eliza thought of her mother's voice, long gone but still clear in her memory. She remembered being told to stand tall no matter what. She lifted her head and looked forward. Even if no one defended her, she would not break. Her calm presence unsettled a few in the crowd, but not enough to stop what was unfolding. The settlers prepared to carry out their decision. There was no trial, no fairness, only power acting without mercy. The town felt frozen in time. Birds stopped singing. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Far beyond the edge of the settlement, hidden among the trees, someone watched. A traveler had been moving through the land quietly, following old paths and reading signs left by nature. He was not part of the town, but he understood injustice when he saw it. From a distance, he sensed something was wrong. The tension in the air did not belong to a normal gathering. As the sky darkened, the feeling of danger grew stronger. Eliza stood alone, surrounded by people yet completely isolated. In that moment, her life balanced on the choices of strangers who believed fear was stronger than truth. No one in the town realized that this moment, built on cruelty and silence, was about to change everything. The decision they made would not stay hidden. What began as an act of injustice would soon face something far more powerful than fear. And as the last light of the day touched the treetops, a presence drew closer, quiet, steady, and guided by a deep sense of right and wrong. The town did not yet know it, but the story they thought they controlled was no longer theirs alone. The air felt colder as time passed, even though the day had not fully ended. Eliza stood where she had been placed, her feet tired, her body tense, yet her mind strangely clear. Fear still lived inside her, but it no longer screamed. Instead, it whispered, reminding her how fragile life could be when others decided your worth. She took slow breaths, the way her mother once taught her, trying to keep herself steady. Around her, the crowd shifted again and again. Some people whispered to each other. Others stared at the ground. A few watched Eliza closely, as if they were trying to understand how someone so small could stand so quietly in such a moment. The settlers spoke among themselves, confident and loud, acting as if everything was already decided. Their voices were sharp, filled with certainty that came not from truth but from power. Eliza's thoughts drifted backward, away from the noise. She remembered her childhood, when life had been simpler. She remembered running through open fields, laughing without fear. She remembered her father's hands, rough but gentle, and her mother's calm voice at the end of every long day. Those memories felt like another lifetime, but they gave her strength now. If this was her final moment, she wanted to face it with dignity. She noticed a woman in the crowd who used to give her bread when work was scarce. Their eyes met for a brief second. The woman looked away quickly, guilt written across her face. Eliza did not feel anger. She understood fear too well to blame others for it. Still, the loneliness cut deep. Time seemed to stretch. Every sound felt louder. The creak of wood, the shuffle of boots, the distant call of a bird. The sky slowly changed colors, soft orange fading into gray. Eliza wondered if anyone beyond this town knew what was happening. She wondered if her life would end without leaving any mark at all. One of the settlers stepped forward and spoke again, repeating the same harsh words. Eliza barely listened now. She had said all she could earlier, and no one had cared. Silence felt easier than fighting words that would never be heard. She lowered her eyes for a moment, not in surrender, but in quiet reflection. Inside her chest, something unexpected began to grow. It was not hope exactly, but a firm belief that what was happening was wrong. That belief gave her a strange kind of peace. Even if she could not change the outcome, she knew the truth, and sometimes knowing the truth was the only victory left. The crowd grew restless. Some people shifted their weight, eager for the moment to pass. Others looked increasingly uncomfortable, as if the scene before them no longer matched the stories they told themselves about right and wrong. Still, no one stepped forward. Far away from the center of the gathering, at the edge of the town, the trees stood tall and quiet. Leaves rustled softly, moved by a gentle wind. From between those trees, a pair of eyes watched carefully. The man standing there did not rush, he observed. He listened. He had learned long ago that patience often revealed more than haste. He noticed the way Eliza stood, straight-backed, calm despite the danger around her. He noticed the way the settlers spoke over her, never once meeting her eyes. He noticed the crowd's silence, heavy with fear. None of this felt unfamiliar to him. He had seen injustice wear many faces, and this one was clear. As he moved closer, staying just beyond notice, he remembered lessons passed down through generations. He had been taught that strength was not proven by control, but by protection. That honor lived in choices made when no one forced your hand. He did not yet know the girl's name, but he knew one thing for certain. What was happening could not be ignored. Back in the open space, Eliza felt the weight of many eyes again. One of the settlers gestured sharply, signaling that the moment was near. A low murmur passed through the crowd. Eliza's heart beat faster, but she kept her face calm. She refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She thought of the road beyond the town, the one she had dreamed of taking someday. She imagined walking freely, without fear following her steps. That dream felt distant now, but holding on to it gave her courage. She lifted her chin slightly, as if looking toward a future that still might exist. Suddenly a new sound cut through the noise. It was not loud, but it was different. Steady footsteps approaching from behind the crowd. A few people turned their heads. Whispers spread again, this time filled with curiosity instead of accusation. The settlers paused, annoyed by the interruption. One of them glanced toward the sound, irritation clear on his face. Eliza noticed the shift and felt a small spark inside her. Something was changing. She did not know what it meant, but the moment no longer felt fixed in place. The man stepped into view slowly, his presence calm but firm. He did not carry himself like someone seeking trouble, yet there was no fear in his posture. His eyes moved across the gathering, taking in every detail. When his gaze finally rested on Eliza, it softened, not with pity but with respect. For the first time since this nightmare began, Eliza felt truly seen. The crowd reacted in small ways. Some stepped back slightly. Others leaned forward, curious. The settlers straightened, trying to reassert control. One of them demanded to know who the stranger was and why he had come. The man did not answer right away. He looked instead at Eliza, then at the people around her. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm and steady, carrying clearly through the open space. He asked simple questions about fairness, about proof, about truth. The settlers dismissed him at first, brushing off his words. But something about the way he spoke unsettled them. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply refused to accept what did not make sense. Eliza listened closely, her heart pounding. With every word he spoke, the tight grip around her chest loosened just a little. She did not yet dare to hope, but the heavy silence that once pressed down on her began to crack. People in the crowd exchanged glances. Some nodded slightly, as if thoughts they had buried were finally rising to the surface. The moment stretched again, but this time it felt different. It felt like a turning point. Eliza realized then that whatever happened next, she was no longer completely alone. Someone had chosen to stand where others stayed silent. Someone had looked at cruelty and decided it would not pass unchallenged. As the light faded further and shadows deepened, the balance of the moment shifted. What began as a scene of fear was slowly becoming something else, something uncertain, but alive with possibility. The man stood quietly in front of the crowd, giving everyone time to notice him. He did not rush his words or raise his voice. His calm made the settlers uneasy. They were used to fear, not patience. One of them stepped forward and demanded again that the stranger explain himself. The man finally spoke, his voice steady and clear, asking why a decision had been made without hearing the full truth. The settlers laughed at first, trying to make him seem foolish. They said the matter was already settled and that outsiders had no place questioning their rules. The man listened without interrupting. When they finished, he nodded slowly, as if he had expected their response. Then he asked another simple question: what proof they had. The crowd grew quieter. No one answered right away. The settlers looked at each other, irritation flashing across their faces. They repeated the accusation, louder this time, but their words sounded hollow. The man did not argue. He only pointed out that repeating a claim did not make it true. His tone was respectful but firm. Eliza watched him closely. She noticed how he stood, grounded, balanced, as if nothing around him could push him away from what he believed. His presence did not feel threatening, yet it carried strength. For the first time since the crowd had gathered, she felt her fear loosen its hold. She still did not know how this would end, but she felt something shift deep inside her. The man turned slightly toward the crowd and spoke again, this time addressing everyone, not just the settlers. He spoke about fairness, about how fear could make people forget their own values. He asked them to think carefully before allowing an innocent life to be ruined by anger and haste. His words were simple, but they landed heavily. Some people lowered their heads. Others looked around, uncertain. A few faces showed relief, as if someone had finally said what they had been thinking all along. The settlers noticed this change and grew more aggressive. One of them accused the man of trying to cause trouble. Another warned him to leave before things turned ugly. The man did not move. He explained calmly that he had seen enough injustice in his life to recognize it when it stood before him. He said that walking away now would mean accepting what was wrong. He would not do that. His voice never rose, but every word carried weight. Eliza felt tears sting her eyes, though she did not let them fall. It was not sadness that moved her, but gratitude. Someone had chosen to stand with her, even when it was dangerous. She stood a little taller, drawing strength from his courage. The man then asked to hear Eliza speak again, without interruption. The settlers objected, but the crowd had begun to change. Murmurs of agreement spread. Reluctantly, they stepped back. Eliza's heart raced as she spoke, but her voice remained clear. She told her story simply, explaining where she had been, what she had done that day, and what she had not done. She spoke the truth, nothing more, nothing less. As she spoke, the man listened closely, watching the settlers' reactions. He noticed how they avoided her eyes. He noticed how their anger had lost its sharp edge. When Eliza finished, silence filled the space. It was the kind of silence that demands honesty. The man then shared what he had observed earlier that day while passing near the settlement. He spoke of seeing another figure near the place where the missing item was last kept. He described details carefully, without accusation, letting facts speak for themselves. The settlers' confidence faltered. A few people in the crowd gasped quietly. Others whispered. The story no longer felt clear and simple. Doubt crept in, replacing certainty. One person stepped forward hesitantly and admitted they had seen something similar but had been too afraid to speak earlier. That admission broke something open. The settlers tried to regain control, shouting over the crowd, but their voices no longer ruled the moment. The man raised his hand slightly, not as a command, but as a request. The noise faded. He reminded everyone that truth often comes out when fear steps aside. Eliza felt a warmth spread through her chest. Hope, fragile but real, took root. She did not yet believe she was safe, but she believed she had a chance. She met the man's eyes briefly, offering a small nod of thanks. He returned it, just as quietly. More voices joined in. People began to speak about what they knew, what they had seen, and what they had ignored. Each word added weight to the truth. The settlers' authority crumbled, not through force, but through honesty. Their anger now looked like desperation. The man never claimed credit. He simply guided the conversation back to fairness whenever it drifted. He reminded the crowd that power meant responsibility, not control. His words were not speeches, but steady reminders of values many had forgotten. As the sky darkened further, lanterns were lit, casting soft light across faces filled with emotion. Fear gave way to uncertainty, and uncertainty slowly turned into reflection. The moment had become larger than Eliza alone. It was now about the kind of people they chose to be. The settlers finally fell silent. Their threats no longer carried strength. The crowd waited, aware that a decision still had to be made, but now it would not be made in darkness. Eliza stood there, exhausted but standing, feeling the weight lift, little by little. Whatever happened next, she knew this moment mattered. The man beside her had reminded everyone that justice did not belong to the powerful. It belonged to those brave enough to protect it. And as the night settled over the town, the truth stood firmly in the open, refusing to be pushed back into the shadows. The crowd stood in a long, uneasy silence after the last words were spoken. It was no longer the heavy silence of fear, but a quieter one, filled with thought. People looked at each other differently now. Faces that once showed anger or indifference were changing, slowly and honestly. The truth had entered the open, and it refused to leave. The settlers shifted where they stood. Their confidence was gone. They had expected quick obedience, not questions. They had relied on fear to keep control, but fear was slipping away from them. One of the men tried to speak again, but his voice cracked. The words did not come out the way he wanted. The crowd did not respond the way it once did. Eliza felt weak in her legs, but she stayed standing. Every moment felt unreal, like she was watching someone else's life instead of her own. The danger had not fully passed, but it no longer felt certain. She could feel the weight lifting, slowly, breath by breath. The man beside her took a small step forward. He did not push or accuse. He simply asked the settlers if they were willing to listen now. Truly listen to the people they claimed to lead. His question was calm, but it left no room for escape. Everyone waited for the answer. A murmur spread through the crowd. Some nodded. Others crossed their arms, uncertain but no longer silent. One older man stepped forward, his voice shaking as he spoke. He said he had lived in the town for many years and had seen how fear had grown. He admitted that staying quiet had been easier than doing what was right. His honesty opened something in others. Another person spoke, then another. Each voice added a piece to the truth. They talked about how accusations were often made without proof, how certain people were always blamed, and how no one felt safe speaking up. The story of the town began to change, right there, in front of everyone. The settlers tried to interrupt again, but their words were drowned out by the rising voices of the people. Not angry voices, honest ones, the kind that come from deep inside after being silent for too long. Control slipped further from the settlers' hands, not because of force, but because the crowd no longer believed in them. Eliza listened with wide eyes. She had never imagined seeing this many people speak openly. For so long, she had thought she was alone in her fear. Now she realized many others had felt the same, even if they had never said it out loud. The man turned to Eliza and asked gently if she was able to step aside and rest. His concern was quiet and respectful. She nodded, and a woman from the crowd came forward to support her. The simple act of kindness nearly broke Eliza's strength. She leaned slightly, feeling the warmth of human care she had been denied for so long. As Eliza stepped back, the focus shifted fully to the truth. The missing item was discussed again, calmly this time. More details came out. The earlier sighting the man had mentioned was confirmed by another witness. The story no longer pointed at Eliza. It pointed elsewhere. The settlers stood trapped by their own actions. They had acted too quickly, too harshly, and now everyone could see it. One of them tried to argue that order had to be maintained. The man responded quietly that real order could not be built on fear. His words settled deeply into the crowd. Lantern light flickered across faces filled with mixed emotions: regret, relief, shame, and courage. The town felt like it was holding up a mirror to itself for the first time. What it saw was not easy, but it was honest. Finally, someone spoke the words that needed to be said. Eliza should be released. The accusation should be withdrawn. A pause followed, and then agreement spread through the crowd. Not loudly, not proudly, but firmly. The settlers had no choice. They stepped back, their authority broken. The decision was undone. Eliza was free. A soft sound passed through the crowd, part sigh, part relief. Eliza felt her knees nearly give way. She had prepared herself for the worst, but she had not prepared herself for this. Survival felt overwhelming. The man watched quietly as Eliza was helped further away from the center. He did not smile or seek attention. His role was done, and he knew it. Justice, once restored, did not need celebration. It needed respect. Some people approached Eliza, offering water, warm words, and apologies. She accepted them gently, though her heart was still racing. Forgiveness would take time, but this moment was a beginning. The settlers avoided eye contact. Their power was gone, replaced by the quiet judgment of the people they once controlled. The town would not forget what had happened. Neither would Eliza. As the night grew deeper, the crowd slowly began to break apart. People walked home in silence, thinking about what they had seen and heard. The town felt different now, not healed, but awake. Eliza looked once more toward the man who had stepped forward when no one else did. Their eyes met briefly. He gave a small nod, a sign of respect, not farewell. Then he turned toward the trees, ready to continue his journey. Eliza stood there, breathing deeply, feeling the ground beneath her feet. She was still alive. She was still standing. And, although the scars of the day would remain, something stronger had taken their place. The truth had faced cruelty and had not backed down. Morning came slowly to the town, as if the sun itself was unsure whether it was welcome. The streets were quiet, far quieter than usual. Doors opened later than normal, and people stepped outside with careful eyes. What had happened the night before still hung in the air, heavy and unforgettable. It was not something that could be ignored or pushed aside. Eliza woke up in a small room offered by a kind family near the edge of town. She had barely slept. Each time she closed her eyes, memories returned, voices, faces, fear. But when she opened them again, she reminded herself that she was safe. For the first time in many days, the word safe felt real. She sat up slowly, her body sore, her heart tired. A woman entered the room quietly and placed a cup of warm drink beside her. No words were needed. The kindness in that simple act spoke louder than anything else. Eliza thanked her softly, her voice still weak but steady. As the town fully woke, people began to talk, not loudly, not angrily, but honestly. Small groups formed outside homes and shops. They spoke about fear, about silence, about how close they had come to letting something terrible happen. Some spoke with regret, others with relief. Everyone spoke with change in their voice. The settlers who once ruled through fear stayed indoors. Their power had not been taken by force, but by truth, and that made it harder to reclaim. People no longer looked to them for answers. They looked to one another. Eliza stepped outside later that morning. The light felt different on her face. She walked slowly, unsure of how she would be received. To her surprise, people nodded as she passed. Some offered quiet apologies. Others simply met her eyes, no longer turning away. Each small moment helped ease the weight she carried. She walked toward the edge of town, where the trees stood tall and familiar. That was where she saw him again, the man who had changed everything. He stood preparing to leave, adjusting the few belongings he carried. He did not seem in a hurry, but he did not plan to stay. Eliza approached him carefully. When he noticed her, he stopped and waited. For a moment, neither spoke. Words felt too small for what had happened. Finally, Eliza thanked him, not with long speech, but with honesty. She told him she would never forget what he had done. He nodded gently and said that he had only done what anyone should. He reminded her that her strength mattered too, that standing calm in the face of fear had helped others find courage. Eliza listened closely, holding on to those words. Before he left, he gave her one final piece of advice. He told her not to let the past define her future. Pain could teach, but it should not rule. Then, without ceremony, he turned and walked into the trees, disappearing as quietly as he had arrived. Eliza watched until he was gone. She felt sadness, but also peace. Some people come into your life not to stay, but to change it forever. Days passed, and the town continued to shift. Decisions were made more carefully. Accusations were questioned. People listened more. The memory of what nearly happened stayed close, like a warning written into the town's heart. Eliza decided she would not remain where fear had once ruled her life. Big prepared to leave, not in secret, but openly. This time, no one stopped her. Some even helped. She packed little, only what she needed. On the morning she left, several people walked with her to the road. There were no grand speeches, just quiet respect. Eliza thanked them, then turned toward the path she had dreamed of for so long. As she walked away, she felt lighter with every step. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was hers. She carried pain with her, yes, but also strength, truth, and the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, change was possible. Behind her, the town stood changed. Not perfect, not free of mistakes, but awake. And that made all the difference. Eliza did not look back again. She did not need to. What mattered was ahead. And so, a story that began with cruelty ended with courage. One choice had broken fear's hold. One voice had awakened many others. And one girl, once powerless, walked forward into a life she finally owned. Everything had changed, not because of anger, but because someone chose justice.